This is the Decision Culture of Agriculture. My name is Andy Junkin, and with me tonight is Paul Raymer. He's with practicalprecision.ca. Paul, tell us what you do.
Well, thanks for having me on here tonight, Andy. Yeah, we're as you say, our company name is Practical Precision, and we're located out of Tavistock, Ontario. Now, probably many of your followers, listeners may not have heard of that, but it's right in the heart of southwestern Ontario. We're about an hour and a half west of Toronto. So yeah, we're on a pretty rich little farmland area here. And as I say, we've been operating this for about 7 years now with my parents and I, and we've been operating in the sphere of precision agriculture, specializing in tools for optical sensing of chasing nitrogen in various crops, mainly corn, that product being Green Seeker, and then we were the very first wide drop dealer, being an attachment for placing nitrogen. And then now we've really spread our wings on a high resolution soil mapping or soil sampling system. So, and we're really gaining a lot of traction in that atmosphere, and we can touch on that as we move forward. But on how these tools that we've been touching many growers' operations.
So describe what your business niche has been, because you're not John Deere, you're not Case, you're not a mainstream agriculture technology company. What is your niche, and how do you service your customers? And I should just clarify where Paul is based out of. It's $25,000 an acre for land. It just grows corn, soybeans, and wheat. He's in a very intensive area. It's about an hour radius. Is the dead center of Ontario's corn belt, where Paul's located. So he has services a lot of dairy, a lot of hogs, but a lot of cash croppers within a 2-hour radius of where Paul's is at, is where the majority of farmland is in Western Ontario, if not the majority of good quality farmland, the best quality farmland in Canada. So Paul, tell us how your business niche is compared for what you do.
Okay, so yeah, you really hit it on the head well there, Andy. Like, yeah, we're definitely right in the heart of very rich, diverse farmland. Again, it's not a huge geographic area, but again, there's a lot of crops grown in our area, except for pineapples and bananas. But there's a lot of vegetables. But yeah, definitely main three crops being corn, wheat, and soybeans. But to touch on our niches, yeah, again, as I was mentioning before, we're heavily into precision agriculture and utilizing technology on how it can impact the various farming operations. And it doesn't really matter with what sort of niche it may have been, but primarily, if let's say in crops, we probably have a tool or product or solution to be able to help that operation. So it's more, so where we really touched off on, and you said that we weren't Deere, we weren't Case. By the way, I used to work for John Deere in research and development for 7 years, so I've got to see the other side of, let's say, the development world. But on the technology side, in our niche, for what we've been applying has been chasing late season nitrogen in corn. That's really been what really put the feather in our cap as far as trying to optimize, let's say, that product that in probably a lot of growers' eyes and minds is nitrogen being like a drug. And we're trying to, without any, again, knock on wood, there hasn't been any sort of regulatory pressure yet, but if or when that may come, we're trying to help set the stage for those type of growers with the type of tools to be able to help optimize the placement of that nitrogen basing on for what the crop is looking for. So that's where optical sensing type technology comes in, that you can mount that onto an applicator and being able to variable rate nitrogen on the fly, specifically in, let's say, late season corn. So that was really, we really set the stage, at least for in the Southwestern Ontario environment, for getting set up, getting growers set up with those type of, or let's say applying the attachments to expand, let's say the expense of, let's say, a sprayer, and outfitting it with the various tools to be able to expand their capabilities, expand the capacity of that applicator to be able to go and put more money in their pocket, not only from nitrogen savings, but from a yield gain. So, so that's historically been our niche, but our fast-growing niche has been high-resolution soil mapping. And
tell us more
so,
about that.
Pardon me?
Tell us more about high-resolution soil mapping and how you're working with growers on that.
Yeah. So again, I'm not trying to make this as a sales pitch anyway. We're just trying to share on what we've been doing and how we've been impacting with, again, applying technology with grower operations. So so we look at, let's say, some of the traditional practices of soil measurement. It's been primarily a grid type measurement, grid sampling. Let's say 1 sample per 5 acres or per 2.5 acres or 1 acre. Even some, very few, have done per half acre. But per half acre is very expensive. But again, that's going out and sticking a few probes in the ground, and let's say the center of a 2.5 acre square or grid area, and collecting those sample measurements and sending it to the lab, getting the lab results, and those lab measurements would be representative for 2.5 acres. So I'm not sure if maybe people, I know 2.5 acres maybe to a lot of growers' mind is a good sizable area, but maybe to some of your people, some of your watchers may put this into perspective. That's about the size of 2 football fields, right, butted side by side. So that's pretty large square area, but again, we're just taking one sample number to be representative for that whole area. So with a lot of technology that's available, application technology, it needs supporting information, or has a capability to be able to apply at finer detail, as opposed to just a 2.5 acre grid. As I say, I'm using that as an example. But then there's also the practices of zone sampling. So those zones could be broken up by elevation data, yield data being very popular, or NDVI, satellite imagery, what have you. And so then there'd be a series of cores taken in that zone, and then those samples for that whole representative area would be sent to the lab, and then that lab number being, again, depending on what that zone size is, one specific number. So again, so we're trying to help, let's say, that application equipment out there, that application capacity, and being able to detail, to fine tune the micromanage spatial areas within the field. We're creating a high resolution, high density map. Okay, so as opposed to, let's say, 1 point per 2.5 acres, or 1 point per 1 acre, we've got 335 points per acre. So it gives us a lot of meat to be able to go in and drill into certain areas of the field, and being able to optimize placement levels, application rates. So yeah, again, so that's really drawn a lot of appeal to growers, especially if they want to go in variable rate fertility, variable rate seeding. Even some have looked at maybe optimizing where they want to place their litter, their manure. So basing on the organic matter map. So again, so it's definitely a new technology, but as I say, we're really gaining a lot of traction, because a lot of, let's say, the younger generation coming along, they're just tired of just seeing a plain lab results, or maybe, let's say, what are their interpolated lab results onto, let's say it was a 2.5 acre grid, and so to be fair to that mapping software, for very few points, it's trying to be able to fill the prediction between point A to point B. So where we're filling that in with geological type information. So again, I won't get into a whole lot of detail, but as I say, we're just trying to the end of the day, we're trying to help fill the gaps and find and help solutions for growers. For, as you say, in our growing area where land prices is 25,000 acres Canadian and above, there's people that want to try to micromanage and optimize that the production of what that ground can produce.
Absolutely. And so what I'm really interested in is the gap that farmers have when the farm family, for instance, I see a lot of farm families, you want to turn down your speakers a wee bit. Paul, just turn down your speakers a wee bit. There's a lot of farm families that go out and purchase the technology, and then they have dreams and goals about what they're going to do with that technology. And then when they 5 years later, they still have the data card sitting on a yield monitor in the combine. What kind of complications do you see within family business cultures that is preventing them from actually using that data into making good quality decisions?
It's a good question, Annie. I would say part of it is, and there's different thoughts going through my head here. Excuse me, to answer that question. I think a lot of it is, I think there's a bit of fear factor involved. Again, as you say, that there's a lot of yield monitors out there with data sitting on it and it's never been touched.
Yeah.
And again, in, let's say, fairness for those operations, again, it's one thing collecting it. Once it's collected, it doesn't give you instant answers or doesn't help you with instant decisions. So it takes time for that, and it takes sometimes special skill sets to be able to go in and drill into that data and look to see what it's telling you, and to be able to, and because it doesn't always give you clear messages of what sort of decisions should be made, or what sort of, it's not giving you the direct answers of what you need to go and do. And again, that's just from yield data, but if we look at kind of the history of yield data, it's where right out of the gate back in the late 90s, and I think you have some history behind that, is, let's say, there was a lot of novelty with going to hook up these fancy yield monitors, and then growers were collecting it, data cards filled up. Some growers went and printed off some nice pretty wallpaper, didn't really do much with it. And then once they turned over that combine that had that yield mapping capability, they went and got a yield monitor, but when the salesperson asked them, well, do you want to have mapping capability? A lot of them said, no, thank you, because I didn't utilize it then. So, and so now, so they got yield monitoring so they can watch their yields in real time as they're going down through the field, but it's such a shame that they're not able to collect that information. And I'm not trying to put down people for not having that capability, but if they're willing to look at the option to collect data, I would really highly encourage them to do that, because it is such valuable information, especially if they want to go and try to understand the ground, or they're basically their business centers, their manufacturing plants, because growers are manufacturers. They if they want to understand what their production capabilities are on the land they have to, we're moving into this world of big data, and I know that's kind of a scary term to a lot of growers, but as I say, you can't manage for what you don't measure, right? As that age-old term from. So, I think yield data is one of the definitely the early pieces, are really some of the most important piece of information that a grower can be able to capture. Even though it's the postpartum of that growing season, it's still a record of what happened that particular growing year. So
yeah. And wouldn't you say that there's a lot? I mean, there's two issues. One is you got to collect information in order to be able to make a decision, say in 2022. So it's 5 years from now. let's say I never had a GIS, never had any information till to date. In order for me to be able to start making some strategic decisions in 2022, I've got to collect 5 years worth of, or how many years do you feel that you have to have of data before you can really start making those decisions?
Well, it's a good question. Yeah, the rule of thumb is at least 5 to 10 years. Okay, because then you're trying to eliminate some of the weather factors out of it.
Yeah. So I think every farm family should sit down and discuss, okay, what kind of decisions are we wanting to make in 5 or 10 years? And because a lot of families have had this technology now for 5 years or more.
Mm-hmm.
And as we said, the data is just sitting in the yield monitor, never being used. And, you know, the real question should be, like, I had a salesman one time make a joke at 3 o'clock in the morning to another salesman. It was 2 o'clock in the morning after a few drinks. And he said, so you make a living selling farmers stuff they don't need. Basically, he was another GPS salesman, right? Because I would say 80% of farmers that I know, they purchase the technology with intentions, but then there's not the follow through on utilizing the full value of this equipment. And being able to drive a tractor up and down a corn row with your hands free and being able to look up Facebook on the internet through your cell phone, that's fine. Yeah. But the real value of what the potential of this GIS and GPS technology is on at least 80% of the operations I know that's just not being tapped. And it's not an issue of the technology, it's the issue of the farm family's business culture. You have a great idea, you spend $40,000 on equipment, and you don't follow through on it. Yep. And there's 2 reasons for that. There's the individual that was excited about the technology, just doesn't want to spend a couple hours sitting behind a computer and learning how to use the software, or he did that, or he forgot about how he did that. He took a course on 2 winters ago, and now he forgets how to do it this February. And then the second issue is you got one person that's interested in technology and 5 other people involved in the operation who are not. And they cannot sit down and make intelligent decisions about how to utilize that data. Is that what you're seeing, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess a lot of the history there, okay, it's one thing being able to go out and collect the information. But I think where a lot of the gap was, or growers, or maybe went to try and they saw the complexity to be able to go and digest that information to make it usable, was maybe on the skill sets they really had. And they want to maybe do it themselves, unless they went out or they went and hired someone to be able to help them with that. But I think there still is that gap, but there's a lot of tools, software tools, coming onto the marketplace to be able to help aid the grower, to be able to help be almost like push button, that the data goes in, they push a button, and then out comes a suggestion or recommendation, right? And so in these companies that are offering these type of solutions, they're understanding where that gap is. So things are definitely getting simplified. So since we're there and quickly emerging to that push button type of solution, there shouldn't be an excuse, let's say, for that grower who is looking to be able to chase more, because that's what it's really all about. Are they desiring to chase more? Because it is all voluntary. Again, there's more and more tools coming available for the grower to be able to help digest and be able to help make decisions.
I'm going to just stop you there for a second. Sorry to tell you a story, but I think it was 7 or 9 years ago. 9 years ago now. God, I'm getting old. But I was at a launch. I'm not going to say the company's name, but you know, it was a major company that in the agriculture sector, that they had a launch of a new software product that was related to GPS and GIS, and they were just simply concerned about selling a product that helped the tractor drive straight up and down the cornfield.
Mhm.
And at the product launch, at the national product launch, I was sitting there in Saskatchewan, and I asked one simple question: how is this going to make the farmer more money? And they had spent 100 engineers and worked on building a widget, and they had been concerned. They had a previous version of that software had not been very user friendly, so they were concerned about making it user friendly, but they never really thought through how is this going to make the farmer more money.
Mhm.
And we're still have this business culture, I think, in agriculture technological development, where we're not asking the question, how's this going to make the farmer more money, and working our way backwards. We're just building cool stuff. It's just, I don't know if it's changed at all in the last 10. I think it's getting a little bit towards that. But for me and two other engineers at the back of the room have to sit down and figure out, overlap is how it's going to pay for this technology. I mean, that was ridiculous. It was on the back of a napkin. It was, and then they across North America, they've actually launched that based on what we did on the freaking back of a napkin. But it was stupid that they didn't have that when they had the national launch. So my question is, if you're a farm family, should you not be saying, okay, 2025, this is what we're going to be doing with this technology, and therefore we need to collect this information?
Mhm. I would say absolutely. And again, we just see on what has changed within the past 5 years and what's going to happen again in 5 years. Like it's an exponential curve on how things are changing so quickly. But I think we also think we have to try to best predict of what is going to be happening, let's say in the farming community, like as far as regulatory pressures, I think would be a big one. But even from an economic standpoint though too, like we're not in $7 corn right now, and I think it made a lot of people very comfortable, probably too comfortable. At that point. So I think operations have to be planning for the worst. And again, there's a lot of tools out there to be able to help them, to be able to step forward or be able to help make their operation more efficient and being able to help improve the bottom line.
But I think when they buy its technology, they've got to say, okay, we're buying this technology for $40,000. How is it going to make us $400,000 in 10 years' time? Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just trying to think of what, a lot of things can change between now and then, but absolutely there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, especially in the cropping sector.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And it's identifying what those are.
Yes.
And once they're identifying, then it's evaluating yourself to see on how well you're picking off that fruit. But not forgetting on where you've been at. So even though you go and try to chase that, and that's why I find a lot of growers saying, well, they've been implementing technology over the past few years, but they all of a sudden start saying, well, we're not seeing any change. And I say, well, where did you come from? And they forget about that. And so it's establishing the benchmark and what you want to improve to.
Yes.
But again, there's too many operations out there where they still have too much. There's still too much opportunity that they can go out and capture. But again, it's an easy list to draft up as far as being able to pick off low-hanging fruit.
Well, and I think that's a critical thing, is that if you had a sales receipt for purchasing new technology, say it was $40,000 receipt, I could see putting on the bottom in black felt tip marker on that receipt, what are the low-hanging fruit that we're going to get out of this product, and then putting a spike in the rafter of a shop and saying we're going to do this by 2022.
Yep.
Because we're not having follow through.
Right. But again, a lot of these tools, there's a lot of tools out there, and depending on how much ground each operation has, some of these tools, they can pay for themselves in the first year. And
it should, but they're not.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
Give us 10 years of technologies you can see pay for themselves in a year.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like what?
We've seen it over and over again. We've seen it over and over again.
What have you seen pay back in 2 years?
Oh, and again, it's coming back to again. there's the tools out there, but it's really the message here is what's the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah.
What are we not capturing? What are we not putting in our pocket? Or what are we spending too much on? Right?
Yeah.
Where are we wasting, and where's the opportunity to capture? Is really the the long and the short of it.
Yeah. And I feel that it's not an issue of the technology or the salesman, right? I feel a lot of families where they're inefficient as a business culture, not only the decision about technology, but other factors of the farm is best expressed in the ability of the family to purchase product and then follow through on something.
Yeah, absolutely. Commitment
And
Commitment and
follow through by
focus.
multiple family members, because it takes everybody to be involved in that decision making, not just one person being a computer whiz.
Right. Exactly. And again, you all have to work as a team, right? And for maybe the computer whiz to be able to help pull the other team members along, but the other team members who are weak in, let's say, the computer department, be having trust and faith that they made a family decision that this is going to be the greater good for the operation.
And I think that the other thing is, do you actually have the meeting at some point in the year to actually sit down and go over this information? And is that, you say February 1st, every February 1st in the afternoon, we're going to go over this information, hell, rain or walk. Because those meetings don't ever happen.
That's right, exactly. And that's why I touched on, again, as I mentioned before, I worked for John Deere and I've worked for other industry. And again, I work for the manufacturing industry. And growers are no different. Well, it's a different environment, but again, they're manufacturers. They're a business, right? And there needs to be that team communication to be able to kind of look at themselves and say, okay, how are we doing for meeting our targets or objectives that were initially lined up?
Yes.
So, again, it's not that hard, but again, it could be, I'm sure if you've seen, it's quite different for some, but again, but I guess once that is all aired out, again, it just, I think is the analogy that you use is kind of like you're tugging on a rope, getting everybody pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, what do you think the future of GIS looks like in the next 5 years for practical purposes? I mean, we can talk about autonomous tractors, we can talk about, but realistically, what do you think the next 5 years, where are the low-hanging fruits, just before we close off here? Because I'm sure a lot of producers would be interested in your perspective on this.
For the next 5 years, I would say, it's I think there's still a ton of opportunity in, let's say, from the corn sector. It's looking at whatever crops, and again, corn is an easy one, and again, for being the king of a crop is what it is, and especially for the genetic engineering that is being built into it, the shortfalls that a lot of operations are not capitalizing on that original investment that they put in the ground every spring.
Yeah.
And so if we look and again, I'm just segmenting out corn, but if we look beyond corn, water, and air, sun, water, and air on the food chain for that crop, nitrogen's pretty high on that list. And if, let's say, that basing on whatever type of weather events, particularly rain, and let's say that crop loses that already, that gets some of that dinner plate washed off of nitrogen, that crop's going to let you know, or it will let you know if you don't do anything about it. But if you do feed it or get it corrected, it'll show up in the bin. And so, and especially for the tools that are available now for being able to go and dress and even just put down rescue nitrogen later in the season, again, you're going to see many dividends of what that crop will produce. So I'd say I think there's still a lot of opportunity. Again, there's a lot of growers that have come forward to address that, but there's still a lot of opportunity out there. And again, Mother Nature waves the biggest stick. So that's definitely probably some of the lowest hanging fruit. But again, I'm talking about maybe some growers that have already engaged into the precision ag sphere, and they've and have adopted some technology. But if, let's say, they haven't, they should have swath control or section control on their sprayer. That's probably the easiest fruit to pick off as far as for putting money back in their pocket, meaning for spray savings. But yeah, but going ahead for 5 years, like again, I don't foresee. Again, nobody has a crystal ball, but we look at where land prices are going, and are we? I guess some of the questions that have to be asked is, are we capturing enough information for being able to go and micromanage those manufacturing plants, right? Those production centers, to be able to fill the dinner plates up accordingly for whatever crop that we're growing, or have an understanding saying, okay, well, that dinner plate is full enough there, we can pull back on whatever type of input. I foresee that there's going to be more knowledge and more information built around, let's say, for the environment that the crop is growing. Okay, and again, it's still come back to the simplicity of how easily crops respond to various inputs, and then also, but where we're going to get the pressure from regulatory pressure is making sure that we're not applying too much. So the advent of technology is probably going to be needed to be utilized to be able to satisfy regulatory bodies. So some growers may not, even though it's all voluntary right now, may not get a choice, or it may not become a choice. It may not become a choice. It may become mandatory.
Okay. Well, Paul, how can folks get a hold of you, and give your name of your company again?
Yeah, it's Practical Precision, and we've got a website called practicalprecision.ca, and that's practicalprecision.ca, and our phone number is 519-655-3555. Again, 519-655-3555.
Paul, thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And my final take-home message is just this. I mean, what is your business culture? I mean, for some family farms, the use of GPS technology is foolish. It's just better for you to stick with the tractors built in the 80s and fix that machinery and hammer down when it comes spring planting. And other families, technology is very much appropriate. I've seen a lot of families use it to get a good cost advantage. But my question to you is, are you able to get your ideas into reality? And what's holding you back from doing that as a family? And if you purchased a product 5 years ago and you're not fully utilizing it, it's not just an issue of the technology and your loss of potential return on investment. It's an issue of what's wrong with your family business culture and how you guys are working together as a team. My name's Andy Junkin. We'll look. Thank you, Paul Raymer, for coming on the show tonight. And you take care and God bless.